You've heard the crackle of a campfire. Now, listen for the snap of twigs in the dead of night. Welcome to Campground Horrors. It was supposed to be a fun weekend. Just 4 of us. Me, Allie, Jordan, and Manson, spending a night out at this little lake surrounded by forest. No big predators, no alligators. Just a calm lake where locals said nothing strange ever happened. We brought a small boat with a barbecue grill on it and a little enclosed cabin. Got there in the afternoon, set a camp near the lake and grilled some meat, laughed like idiots, and told old stories. It was perfect. We waited until late evening to get inside our boat and start fishing. The water looked like glass. It reflected the sky so clearly. Jordan cast the first line, then Manson, then me. Eli was still inside the cabin, getting drinks, when I felt the first tug. At first, I thought it was just a snag, maybe a rock or some old wood. But then it pulled again, harder. My rod bent in half. Jordan grabbed it with me. We both held on as something below yanked with way more strength than a small lake fish ever could.
But there's nothing big in that lake, right?
Yes, people said that all the time, but then the water changed fast. Waves. Out of nowhere. Just choppy, angry waves slapping against the sides of the boat, shaking it. Whatever had our hook wasn't thrashing. It was pulling. Straight down. We all tried to reel it in, but it wouldn't budge. Manson cut the line. We just wanted it gone. After a few moments, the lake calmed. Just like that. Like someone had flipped a switch. We sat there for a second, trying to laugh it off. Big rock, Manson said. But none of us believed it. Still, we decided to keep going. I went inside to grab more hooks, but the box of hooks was gone. I checked the floor, the drawers. Nothing. We all clearly remembered packing them. We had even double-checked the tackle box before we left the dock. We gave up. Used whatever bait and hooks were still left on the rods. But as I sat back down, our boat shook again. Like something big was right beneath it. The boat shook so hard that we were afraid it would flip. We were afraid to even get our face toward the lake to see underneath. Even though the water was clear, we couldn't see anything. There was nothing. We were not too far away from the small tree line, and so we started our boat and literally ran over the side on the ground. We saw from the ground, the water started acting strange again. Sometimes it would be calm, and then suddenly some waves would come.
Why didn't you just leave?
Our boat was moving and sometimes shaking in the lake. We were too afraid to get inside the boat and leave that place. Even when the lake was silent, it felt wrong. The time was close to sunset, and so we were forced to spend the night. The lake was surrounded by trees and rocks. We picked a spot close to a small cluster of trees and tried to rest. At that moment, trying to stay the night felt riskier than leaving. None of us really slept. Around 2 a.m., Eli said he saw something move on the water. A shape, but he couldn't describe it. We kept hearing the sound of rustling and tree branches twitching. We figured the place was surrounded by insects and maybe also animals. We just waited for the sky to turn gray. At first light, we cut the anchor rope and drifted until the sun rose high enough to guide us. Didn't even eat breakfast. When we got back to the dock, our tackle box, with the missing hooks, was right where we had placed it. I was sure it was not there when we were searching for it. Locals said that place was the most peaceful, but our experience was totally different and scarier. That's what this lake felt like. Scary. Whatever was in that lake, it didn't want us to fish again. I'm Alex. My friend Ferris and I decided to take a quick weekend camping trip deep in the forest reserve. We packed light. Enough food. A small tent, some firewood, and our sleeping bags. The plan was to hike a little beyond the marked trails, set up camp near a clearing, and just relax. We pitched our tent near a stream. It was already evening, and golden light filtered through the trees. We made a small fire, roasted marshmallows, and swapped old college stories until the stars came out. No sounds except crickets. It was perfect, at least until we fell asleep. I woke up to a noise. It was subtle, like leaves crunching under someone's foot. Then another. I sat up in my sleeping bag, and before I could even say Ferris's name, a blinding flashlight hit my eyes, then shouting. One yelled in a language I didn't understand. The next thing I knew, I was being dragged out of the tent. There were 3 or 4 of them. Masks on their faces, knives and guns in their hands. We didn't even resist. We couldn't. They had us on the ground. Took our phones, wallets, even our shoes. One of them dumped out our backpacks. They didn't just want money. They took everything. Even our jackets and pants. It was humiliating. Then came the worst part. One of them pulled out rope from our own bag. That's when Ferris started begging. Please, take whatever you want, just don't tie us up. Keep the gear, keep the clothes. Just don't leave us like this. We won't tell anyone. We swear. But they didn't care. They tied us to a tree, side by side, hands and ankles. Then, as if to shut us up for good, one of them pulled a crumpled tissue pack from our supplies, stuffed tissues into our mouths, and wrapped cloth around our faces. Silencing us, and without a word, they vanished into the dark. I couldn't speak. The gag in my mouth was dry and tight. But I kept shifting it, pushing against it with my tongue, until it started to soften. After a while, I managed to press it against the side of my mouth and dampen it just enough to work it loose. It took forever, but eventually, I spit it out. A few minutes later, Ferris managed to loosen his too. We didn't say anything, just breathed. Quietly, because it was freezing. We were barely clothed, our backs against rough bark. Our bodies were stiff, cold. I twisted my wrists against the rope. Nothing. The knots were too tight. Ferris was trying too. I could hear the faint scraping of rope against bark. We had both started rubbing the bindings against the tree behind us, not even sure if it would work. But it was the only thing we could do, so we kept going. Minutes turned into hours, until our wrists burned. It was either cut the rope, or wait to be found by a wild animal, or worse. Every sound felt closer. A rustle of leaves made us flinch. A hiss, probably a snake. I don't even know. And then the bugs. I could feel them crawling on my skin. We stayed like that for 4 or 5 hours. I had no idea what time it was. Maybe close to dawn, maybe still the middle of the night. Paralyzed, not by the ropes, by the fear. That's when the real panic set in. When your body starts to shut down, and your brain starts asking questions like, is this it? Is this how we die? I gave up, stopped moving, let my head fall back against the bark and stared blankly up at the trees above us. And then Ferris's voice. I think mine's coming loose. He sounded surprised, almost scared to believe it. I looked over and saw him twisting harder, pulling with everything he had. It wasn't easy. And finally, a snap. His hands were free. Just when we had given up hope, we finally got free. Barefoot, half-dressed, and shaking. Our legs were numb. We both were crying. We used branches for support and started walking, not even knowing which way. Just walking. Just surviving. We walked for hours, until the sky started to lighten. We finally found a dirt road and collapsed when we heard a motorbike in the distance. The man who found us thought we were drugged or mad. He gave us water and clothes and took us to a ranger station. We filed a report. But nothing came of it. The men who attacked us were never caught. We don't even know if they were thieves or something worse. They didn't just rob us. They left us to suffer. Since then, I haven't gone camping. Not once. I still feel like there's something crawling on me. Some forests don't just take your gear. They take your peace of mind. I'm 24 years old, and camping isn't just a hobby for me. It's my escape. I love the solitude, the cold air, the silence between the trees. But more than anything, I'm drawn to places with history, and searching for places no one talks about anymore. I came across a thread that stopped me cold. It was about a place called Grey Hollow Forest, hours from the nearest town. According to the post, a group of people once lived there. Not homeless, not hikers, but something else.
Let me guess. Off-grid wild people.
Exactly. Apparently, around 40, maybe even 50 years ago, a group of individuals formed a kind of self-sustained tribal lifestyle deep in Grey Hollow. They hunted their own food, made tools from wood and stone, and had no contact with modern life. And they didn't like strangers entering their space, the kind of people who might do anything to protect what they considered theirs. Over time, they just faded. But a few people claimed that some of them might still be out there. There was no confirmation, just rumors.
So, don't tell me you packed and went straight there.
Pretty much. I never go unprepared. I always carry a handgun for protection. Not to use, but just in case. Drove out the next morning and hiked for 2 hours off the main trail. Eventually, I found a flat clearing, perfect to set up a camp. It was quiet, just the occasional creak of branches. No other humans within miles, and I felt amazing. Night came fast. I built a small fire, cooked a bit, and sat for a while, reading a book in the firelight. After a few chapters, I crawled into my tent, zipped it shut, and eventually drifted off to sleep. But sometime in the night, I woke up. I don't know if it was the cold, or maybe just too much water before bed, but I had to step out. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, unzipped the tent, and quietly stepped outside. Everything was still. No wind, no movement. Just the sound of my boots crunching on the frozen ground as I walked a little way into the trees. That's when I heard it. I crouched behind a tree, staying perfectly still. And then I saw them. 2 figures, walking near my tent. I couldn't see their faces in the dark, but I caught glimpses of their outline and clothes in the firelight, like people who'd been living out here for a long time. They carried jagged, primitive blades, clearly handmade weapons. One looked like a sharpened piece of metal tied to a branch. The other I couldn't even describe. It looked more like a tool than a weapon.
You weren't alone out there after all.
I held my breath. Their steps circled the tent once and stopped. I reached silently for my gun. My fingers wrapped around the grip as I kept my eyes locked on the figures, still hovering near my tent. Suddenly, they lunged at the tent. I heard the tarp jerk violently, the sound of hands clawing and tearing at the fabric. They were ripping it open like animals. Fast. Brutal. No hesitation. One of them growled. I swear to God. Actually growled. That was it. I didn't wait. I stood up from behind the tree, aimed into the air. 2 sharp cracks tore through the woods like thunder. They ran. They bolted into the trees like animals. I didn't chase. Gun still raised, waiting to see if they'd come back. But they didn't.
That gun might have saved your life.
I knew I wasn't waiting. I grabbed what I could. Flashlight, my bag, the handgun. I just wanted to get out of there. I moved fast through the woods and started hiking out. Even in the dark, I didn't look back once. Not until I saw my truck. And when I finally got in and locked the doors, that's when I let myself breathe again. I drove without stopping. Since then, I haven't taken risks like that again. No more deep, forgotten forests. No more chasing places with dark history. I still camp. But only where I know I'm not being watched. Not every campsite has a ghost story, but some don't need one. If you've ever felt watched in the woods, drop your story in the comments. We're always listening.